Okay, so welcome everybody to episode whatever it is of the Shamalama Ding Dong Shit Show with Cope and whatever you call me nowadays. Yeah, so basically it's been a crazy fucking week. The world's no longer burning, but it's now being plagued by like the goddamn like Black Plague or something like that. I don't know. And yeah, apparently we're all waiting on our Trump check though. So have you got a Trump check yet, Cope?
We've got some of those things in place. They're coming through. We're being updated as we speak. But it's something that everyone's doing, from what I understand, what every country is doing. So, yeah, okay. It's interesting times.
You know, today I saw an article that like actually kind of like fucking astounded me a little bit, right? Like, okay, we're used to like the whole like too big to fail bank bailouts and all this bullshit. Do you want to know what the government did last night, Cope?
Tell us what happened.
These motherfuckers are now bailing out fucking leverage hedge funds that were doing 50x fucking margin trading.
Oh, yeah, seems legit.
Like this is like the epitome of like your degenerate gamblers of the fucking like stock stock market, right? We're now going to bail these people out because of the economic crash. Like if you're trading anything on 50x leverage, I mean, like it's literally the epitome of gambling. You're trying to get rich quick, and if you get wiped out, like, why the fuck should anybody feel sorry for these people, man? Like, why are we printing fucking money to pay off goddamn gambling debts? Like, ooh, yeah. So basically, this is where the world's at right now, Cope. We're like in full on economic meltdown. There's a fucking allegedly some kind of like killer flu running around trying to kill everybody. And while we're dealing with all of this shit, the government's secretly trying to, kind of like slide some anti cryptography laws and, play Who Wants a Bailout. And also trying to give the Department of, I think it's Homeland Security now that is requesting the right to hold people indefinitely without a trial. Yeah, so the world's going to shit, but I don't know. You got anything fun you want to talk about this week?
Well, yeah, I don't know if I can follow that up with anything more fun than death and viruses. But yeah, look, I've looked at the general kind of stuff that's going on. I've got some more shit to add, but this coronavirus takes precedent over everything else. And it's a complex thing, isn't it? Because is it fake news? Not fake news? Is it as bad as it's supposed to be? I mean, people are still saying that the flu kills more people than corona's killed, but at the same time, corona keeps racking up the death count. I heard from I think it was like China last week. Their death count had an extra 380 odd people added to it for the death count. So I don't know. I mean, like it seems like it's something we should be paying attention to if it's going to continue multiplying the death count. At the same time, I'm seeing a lot of stupidity out there. I mean, apart from the toilet paper hoarding and that kind of thing. There was a article. I'll see if I can pull it up while we speak here. But essentially, we've got a whole bunch of warnings saying, don't go here, don't do that. You need to stay, 1.5 meters away from each other, and make sure that you don't have contact with other people, no hugging, no kissing, that kind of thing. Also, it's not like you can't do it, right? But it's kind of like, well, you really shouldn't do that stuff, and stay away from each other. And anyway, the other day it was a bit of a hot day, and there was Bondi Beach was packed, and so was Manly Beach. So a bunch of places that were packed. So people don't seem to be taking it too seriously, and it's helping it spread.
Yeah, I think like to kind of like get a little bit, just like drift maybe like a little bit away from current events and politics. I would say like all of this stuff that we're saying right here. One of the things that makes me extremely fucking aware of is just how, I guess you could say, like how heavily manipulated we are by fear, right? Like so much of the the news cycle, like all this mainstream media, it's all based on pushing this fear agenda, right? Like they want you to get into this like reactionary state where like now we're like afraid of other people. We're all kind of like into that like look out for number one mindset. You know, we got to go to the fucking grocery store and hoard 5,000 rolls of toilet paper because it's the goddamn apocalypse. And oh my god, you know, you got to like beat up the little old lady in the parking lot and take her fucking canned goods. And you know, I feel like so much of this shit, you know, especially with like the economic collapse too, it's like it's really just playing on people's fears, right? But like at the same time, like if we step back from it and just kind of like look at what's going on, I mean, like the government is obviously just sitting here printing fucking money like a fucking printing press, like it always does. Life as we know it is generally still going on. I mean, even if it's a little bit weirder than normal. I don't know. I think like the big thing to just kind of like keep in perspective is, as crazy as it looks, like I don't know, Cope, how much has your day to day life really changed?
You know, the thing is, to be honest, I don't really get out too much these days because of my situation, and it's not really a big impact for me. But yeah, I don't go out that often anyway. But it's interesting because like housemates working from home because essentially they've closed down areas of the city. It's getting pretty full on. Let me just say that it's getting pretty full on. We're talking about closing schools. There's all the shit going on. So I'm like, well, yeah, look, it's not so much of an impact right now, but as this thing kind of like spreads and people are struggling to control it, um, they're putting in more and more measures to stop people spreading it. So there are people that are being affected by this on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, and I get that. Like I'm just like looking at my life, and you know, like I can tell you, like from this whole thing, like my life hasn't drastically changed much. And I'm not saying there's not people out there that have, right? I'm saying like I definitely feel like this thing is like the current situation here, not just the virus, but like I kind of feel like all of this is like definitely being pushed as like a serious like media hysteria kind of thing. And again, like, I was talking about this earlier in one of the chats. I feel like whenever these kind of things happen, when the media gets like so fucking out there that like everybody starts panicking and freaking out like this, to me, it's always some kind of smokescreen, right? Like, I'm not saying these events aren't happening. I'm not saying they're not terrible. I'm not saying there's not like a virus out there that we should be being careful of. But I'm saying, like, you've got 24/7 news coverage going on this thing on like so many channels. You've got it all over the internet. Like, I could like look at the newspapers we have stacked up here for the last week. Like, the front page of every newspaper is talking about, COVID-19. And I'm just like, and I feel like when the media really starts getting into this fucking like hamster wheel of pushing like some kind of agenda, be it like 9/11, anything like this, whenever we get into this cycle, there's usually like some really serious shit going on in the background that we're not paying attention to. And to me, like, that's, in my mind, the scarier stuff. Like, that's the stuff that I'm usually more worried about. Like I said, they're trying to outlaw cryptography right now, basically, right? Like, you're not going to be allowed to have end to end encrypted messaging. And I think that's going to basically be like a blanket way to attack cryptocurrencies, too. So, like, even though it's technically not messaging, like, on some level, they could probably argue that it is. Like we're messaging our balance ledgers, etc. And then whenever I start seeing this thing about like detaining people again, man, this is like really kind of like harking back to the whole Patriot Act thing to me, right? And like basically you can have like full access to just spy on people and detain them with like no justifications. And then you also like don't have to tell anybody you've detained them. You don't have to give them a trial. I mean, technically, they can already do this by just calling you a terrorist, but now I guess they're going to be able to say, oh, well, you're sick, so we can do the same thing. I don't know, man. It's definitely a crazy world, and as much as I try to, like focus on my own self and not get caught up in it, I think it's kind of hard to to not at least like have some kind of like idea of what's going on right now, you know?
Oh, for sure. And if you look at social media, you can see the hysteria there too. I mean, like I said, I don't really use Facebook. I kind of like go there for the buy and sell sections and that kind of thing. But while I'm there, I have to go through the main site to get there. And I've got friends that are just they're all throwing around their opinions and they're getting into fights and calling each other selfish and all those kinds of things. Because people are bulk buying and like, look, I'll tell you myself, I've been bulk buying for years, right? And it's something that it's just part of what I do. And now if I go to the store and bulk buy, I'm going to get harassed. I may even get beat up. And to be honest, there was a couple of cases already now where people have been stabbed. Yes, stabbed in parking lots and in the stores and that kind of thing for food supplies and that kind of thing. So it is a pretty full-on situation that's happening here. But we have to distinguish between the two things, right? Because there's the disease itself, right, which is a big scary monster. Which and that's what I'm saying. It's not that it's a big scary monster, but it's a thing that's out there. It's happening. I mean, we can just palm it off and not be worried about it. But we should be taking some kind of precautions here. Make sure you clean yourself properly, wash your hands, a couple of showers a day. And even just the hug and the kiss and the distancing and that kind of thing is something that you should probably be considerate of. But on the other side of things, we've got the whole, how did this come about? And that's where, the flags are going up for me. I mean, even just thinking the first time that I spoke about Corona was with Ron, and he was like, "Oh, what do you reckon of this thing?" and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, "Well, look, there's something that sounds a bit sus. There's something not right here." And I'm not talking like conspiracy theory. It was engineered, and suddenly we're going to be living in Resident Evil kind of situation, but more along the lines of as I mentioned to Ron, it's the whole thing is the news kind of said, "Well, we know that there's a plane coming with coronavirus on it," and blah 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 blah, and they did fuck all. Is it something to be serious about or not? Because on one hand, you've got the government, you've got the media, all that kind of stuff saying it's this big, serious, scary monster. And, they knew it was coming. They actually had a pinpoint on the plane, right? And they were just like, yeah, well, we kind of looked at everyone, we kind of measured them and weighed them and made sure everything was okay. And it was kind of we just let them go, right? Next thing you know, you've got heaps of cases. And to be honest, the comparison that we've got happening here for Australia is we fucked up pretty much as bad as Italy. And we're going to end up in that same boat eventually. And that's a scary thought. So this is what I'm saying. There's the issue itself of, the disease, which is one thing. And there's how we're handling, which is another. And I find there's a little bit of suspect in there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Man, whenever I see videos and stuff coming out of China, Wuhan, everything, I mean, you see people walking around in full on hazmat suits. They're spraying antivirals everywhere. They're just walking down the streets, through all the the transit areas, everything. They're spraying everything with antivirals, right? It seems like they're really tackling this thing head on. And then I look at the U.S. and they're like, well, maybe stay at home, but if you still got to go out, go ahead. And I mean, even my job, right? My job went and they got permission from the government to stay open by being declared quote unquote critical to the infrastructure or whatever. And I think that's what we're going to see is a lot of places are going to get approval to stay open anyway. So it's even if we go under quarantine, martial law, etc., you're still going to have tons of people just going around doing their thing anyway. And yeah, I don't know, at some point I think it just kind of is what it is, right? I mean, I know that's kind of my go-to on a lot of this stuff, and look, I'll go ahead and fully admit, if it was going to be a full-on Resident Evil zombie outbreak, I'm much more prepared for that. I've been watching The Walking Dead since the beginning. Even though it's kind of gotten shitty now, I've seen all the old classic zombie movies. I mean, I've played all the zombie apocalypse games. I mean, I'm as ready as I can be, right?
Well,
I'm prepared for this, Cope. I've been training for this my whole life. No, but Yeah, I mean,
You're in a bunker.
I wish that's like the one thing I don't have because I'm not rich, but I think like the most important thing that we can really do, like the thing that we do have control over, in this situation is like we got to remember to just take that time to like step back, breathe a little bit, kind of like assess our own personal situation, and do what we can, and like not get caught up worrying about all the stuff that we have no control over. I know it's definitely easier said than done. I've been fighting it in my own life, and I'm what a lot of people describe as somebody that never worries about anything. But I mean, it's pretty rough right now, right? Like, I mean, I've got like my parents are freaking out. My mom was one of those people hoarding fucking toilet paper a week ago, and like going to the store like 5, 6 times a week, trying to like stock up on everything. I mean, it's a lot, right? And then like me dealing with my job, like they're implementing like all of these new practices about how we've got to like not touch door handles, and like we've got to like disinfect like the entire workstations every time we like move or any. It's crazy, right? And I'm not trying to say like all of this shit's trivial or anything. I'm just saying like it's so much, and it's so like very much in our face. You know what I'm saying? Like I think it's definitely important to take that time to just kind of like ground and like catch your breath some.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the thing. Like, I think that we're still in this binary mode, right? Where it's either crazy hysteria, where people are willing to stab each other, literally stab each other for like a toilet paper roll, to completely blasé and not giving a fuck, right? Where like I posted before that dude who was like licking his hand and wiping it on a train fucking pole thing, like dude, like don't do that. Like, don't be a fucking idiot, right? You're not supposed to be doing that kind of shit. We have to have like that middle ground, right? Because we don't have to be like crazy killing people. We don't have to be, trying to spread the shit because it ain't cool. That middle ground, go for the gray area. The gray area exists. It's a nice, comfortable space for most of the sane people.
Yeah, I mean, if only we were all sane. But I mean, and see, like this is where I think like the shit gets really complicated, right? Because like even if you're not like like overly freaking out about the virus and like all this kind of shit, there's definitely that human element where you're now put into that position to where you have to worry about what other people are gonna do, right? Like even if you're fine, you're resigned to the situation, you're willing to kind of like do the stay at home thing and kind of like let the world do what it needs to do. You're also stuck with the, well, what do I do when Joe Blow and fucking asshole Johnson and goddamn all those motherfuckers go out and hoard all the shit so that like I can't have food to eat, I can't wipe my ass. I now don't have a paycheck coming in, because like so many places are laying people off without pay. You're hoping your Trump check comes in. Like I get it, man. Like there's so many angles this thing's hitting people with all at once, and yeah, I mean, like I'm not trying to like blow my own horn here, but I think like when something can get to the point where it's like stressing me out, like most people are probably pretty fucking stressed. You know what I'm saying? And it just kind of like is what it is. Like I've been worrying about Azaria a lot because like I know she gets like anxious in these kind of situations, but oh man, it's like just like looking at like my own family and like just lots of people that I know. I'm like, God, this is bad, right? Like even if it's like not the virus that's like so fucking deadly, and like it's not like the fuck, dude, we're in crypto. We've been expecting the economic collapse, right? It's like whenever it all hits the fan, right? Like this is when shit gets real, and I think we're gonna see some of the best of humanity, and we're gonna see some of the worst of humanity, right? And I don't know, man. I'm just trying to kind of like be mindful of my own self, my own actions, and you know, I guess like on some level, hoping for the best, preparing for the worst. It just I know, like that sounds really cliche, but I mean, like, what else can you really do in this situation, right? I mean, other than go off into the woods and stick your head in the sand.
Yeah, that's right. There's not a lot that you can do. Just do the best that you can and try not to lose your shit, which can be difficult. Like I can understand how we get to this zone, right? Because there's a bunch of shit flying around. You're hearing rumors, and if you don't have the capability to be able to cross-reference these things or do your own research, if you're like a other sheep in the crowd, if you will, all of this stuff's going to get to you. You start going to get a bit of anxiety, a bit of depression. Because you'd be thinking to yourself like, oh, why wasn't I prepared for this? Why, all these thoughts are going through your head, and then you're like, okay, well, I need to go to the shops and pick up some stuff. And there's a lady with a trolley full of toilet paper, like all the toilet paper, like all of it, every single one that she could get. And you're just like, well, I just need one. And she's like, fuck you, man. Like, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to be a zombie. And, you lose your shit, particularly if you've got like kids at home and that kind of thing, a lot of stress. I get it. I understand. It can be difficult to keep you cool, but, just keep in mind, right? It's going to be okay, right? Yeah, there's going to be some shit going on, but if you keep you cool, right? Because like what we do, right? Because we tried going up to the shops and that kind of thing. There's people everywhere trying to buy stuff. So what we did is we took a little bit of time and did some midweek shopping, right? You go in the middle of the week, and there's not a lot of people there, right? And there's like more stuff on the shelves and that kind of thing. So like there's ways around it. There's people that are going to other stores, right? So you just have a bit of a look around. Right? You can check some stuff online. You can see stores that have stock, and you go, okay, well, I can't go to this one that's 5 minutes away. I can't go to this one that's 10 minutes away. I'm going to have to go to this one that's 20 minutes away. But you can get your shit done. It's all good, right? Just let the idiots be idiots. Don't get caught up in their rubbish. Do your thing. Get through it. And once this shit's going to be normalized at one point. We're going to look back on this and think like, fuck, man. Like, remember that time when everybody bought toilet paper and, if you had stocks in toilet paper, you did really fucking well. And if not, well, then too bad. But, we got through it. And now you've got people with, 2 years supply worth of toilet paper that are kind of like sitting on it like fucking idiots now.
Yeah, and there's lots of people that have been, like doomsday prepping and all of this stuff. Like they're ready for this. They've got like the bunkers full of like rice and fucking canned beans and shit. They're like, hell yeah, motherfuckers, bring it. And got like their two AR-15s, one in each hand, with like 1,000 round ammo for each. Yeah. I mean, I don't think we're gonna get to like obviously like the zombie apocalypse type situation. But I definitely think if we get into a situation where it's an extreme economic collapse, right, and like people really are, like fighting for food in these types of situations, and the U.S. Like I try to imagine a country like the U.S. in like a Venezuela type situation, and I think it's got potential to like really be full on shit hit the fan, right? Because like so many people have guns here. Yeah, like there's definitely not like any kind of like force out there that could keep the people suppressed other than just like their own ignorance, which seems to be pretty prevalent in this society. Like let just overwhelm people with misinformation and to the point where they would rather just kind of like keep on sheeping through life and not worrying about like the implications of all this stuff going on. I think that'll be like the real, straw breaking the camel's back when people like can't get food, their money's not worth anything, and that's kind of like the point that I'm, I guess you could say like hesitant of, especially with like the potential of putting us on lockdown. There's been lots of rumors going around about National Guard coming in, martial law being implemented. I don't think in this entire country we have enough National Guard or army to really like suppress the civilian population. And yeah, I think we have like a potential ticking time bomb there. But at the same time, I like to think that we're at least equipped enough to prevent it from going that far downhill to where we have to worry about people like fighting and killing each other over food. time will tell. I mean, we can already see there are countries where that kind of shit literally happens. Like Venezuela would be my first example of what happens during an economic collapse when people can't get food. Um, yeah. Will we get there, Cope? I don't know, man. Will people be walking around Melbourne with like goddamn body armor and AKs, like trying to, like hunt down canned goods? I mean, I would like to. I would really like to hope that we're not going to, like go that route. But I mean, the whole thing is at the end of the day, we just don't know. And again, I think the best course of action is to not worry about the unknowns to that extent, and to just try to kind of hope for the best. Do what you can to prepare personally for the worst, and don't forget to breathe.
That's right. We will get through it. And just that image that I chucked up there, it was pretty interesting, right? Because a lot of people, they kind of give shit to refugees and that kind of thing. And I thought it was a good comparison there. Watching people go nuts over fucking toilet paper. Yet we're all sitting here judging refugees. They came to this country illegally and all that kind of stuff. And, they should go back to their own country and just, it's not that bad, right? Dude, it's toilet paper, right? We're sitting here getting into fistfights and stabbing each other for toilet paper. And, the comparison to refugees, I think, is quite relevant there.
Yep. I think this is definitely like one of those prime situations where like getting into our own head amplifies the problem, right? Like letting our own fears kind of like run wild and dictate our actions is going to like catastrophically worsen the situation. Just like that meme that I think Zippy dropped with the toilet paper. Yeah, like some things can be solved by like simple math. Like you don't need a year's worth of toilet paper to last 2 weeks. You just don't. You don't need a year's worth of food to last 2 weeks, right? But the thing is, like, how do you tell people it's only going to be 2 weeks, and convince them of that whenever it seems so clear from like all of this mass media hysteria that we don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to get the situation under control. And then we keep seeing like all the reports coming out of Italy where it's like seemingly like the actual apocalypse going on. Like I can tell you, if I pull up YouTube right now, there's earlier I did, and there was at least 2 videos talking about Italy has like worst death toll day so far, right? And then of course there's all the people saying like we're gonna be worse than Italy, we're gonna be worse than Italy, and maybe we will. I think there's also something to kind of like keep in mind as we have a population like 100 times the size of Italy. I'm just pulling like some like fucking random math out there. I don't know the actual stats, but I know Italy is a significantly smaller country than the U.S. And I would say like Australia probably has a larger population than Italy. I mean, I know you guys are mostly concentrated kind of like on the southeast, right? But yeah, I mean, like, Italy is not a very big country, and like I definitely think it's valid to kind of like point out like how bad this thing got there. But I also think it's a very small country, and they're packed a lot closer. From everything that I've seen through Italy, like you're most of the buildings are like almost built like shotgun style, where you're like touching your neighbors' houses. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, again, like I feel like on that there's like 2 ways to look at this, right? Like you don't want to downplay it, like there's nothing at all to worry about. But I definitely, again, I think it's very important to not like over worry in this situation, right? It's just it definitely and it is what it is situation, and I really do like sincerely hope all of you guys are safe, and I do sincerely hope that it does not get worse. I would love to not have this thing get to where like all of our loved ones are getting impacted, and we all have to like feel this thing personally. But also I think if we kind of like look at this thing compassionately, do what we can to help others that like don't have options or that are impacted. I think that's the best way to kind of like move forward. And again, like that's where that fear can get in your head. We're like, well, I can't help somebody because like, what if I need whatever thing that I helped them with? But at the end of the day, man, I think we got to remember we're all human beings, and whether we like it or not, we're all in this thing together. None of us is getting out of this thing alive, and I'd rather go down being who I am and caring about people than trying to like hide myself away in a fucking basement with a gun and trying to protect my stash of toilet paper and canned beans or whatever.
Well, I think just leaning back into the conspiracy theory side of things, that's something that I heard in regards to, at least in Australia, right? The whole groceries kind of thing. They're actually staggering the stocking deliveries. So, from my understanding, from the small amount that I've read on it, so don't quote me too much on this, but it seems as though even though essentially what we could do is saturate the market and have like the stocks being the shelves being restocked consistently until people have their absolute fucking fill, and obviously make a lot of money. That they're staggering their sales and that kind of thing, which to me seems like it would be just adding to it. Like if that there's a lot of people that want stuff, instead of just basically just giving them all the stuff that they need until they're kind of like air quotes secure. They're staggering it out, which, as we were saying a little bit earlier, leans into the conspiracy theory side of things, where they're trying to create that conflict and have that kind of like disruption without throughout society. So just thought I'd chuck that in there.
Chuck it, Cope. Chuck it.
Yeah, but I don't know. There's all that shit that's going on with. But talking about death, right? Because this is something that we are talking about last week, and something that I found pretty interesting because there's like synchronicities in the universe, right? Like we do our shit and we talk some stuff, and whether it's because we talked about it that we notice it a bit more, or maybe it was just there the whole time. Yeah, like who knows, right? We just manifest these things, but we've talked about the good place in the past, and I don't know if you'll have seen the end of it because, like, from my understanding, it's finished, right? So I watched what I could on my end, and they had this very interesting concept of what happens in the good place, like when you actually get to the end of the road, and you do actually get into the good place. The kind of conflicts that you have when you have all of your desires met. Have you seen this, Clay?
The Good Place? Yes, definitely.
Have you seen it to the end? Like
Yeah.
is it the final
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I've watched every episode. We actually didn't we talk about it one week? Well, I don't know, maybe I was still waiting on the last episode, but yeah, I mean I watched it all, and I definitely think it's very valid to like this is something we've talked about at least to some extent. But like if everything is rainbows and butterflies, like all your fucking wishes come true, there's no bad. I think like the problem is without that contrast, all of that quote unquote good just becomes like monotonous, mundane nothingness, Like you have nothing to compare it to. And I think ultimately, yeah, we have to have some kind of like bad in this existence to give flavor to existing, Like it's not pleasant. I mean, I know a lot of us would rather avoid the, like quote unquote negative things, but I feel like, opposite sides of the same coin, right? Like you don't have one without the other. And if everything just was, quote unquote positive, then I definitely feel like we would almost just feel like, what's the right word here, Cope? Kind of like stuck, like almost like nothing was happening at all. It would just be monotonous.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think that's in this last segment of the Good Place. Spoilers for those that want to watch it. They have this conflict where essentially they have everything that they want and they need, and it turns into rubbish. you start losing yourself, losing your mind, and all that kind of thing. So it kind of like leans on the fact that we need we need things to go wrong, right? In some way, shape, or form. And like it's like necessity breeds creation, right? If we don't have a need to do something, that if we don't have a problem to fix, we just end up, our minds turn to mush. The use it, lose it scenario as well. And I think it kind of like reflects on this situation that we're talking about here, where essentially, like, yes, there's some bad shit going on and all that kind of stuff, but if you keep your head and go, okay, well, this is part of that stuff that we're talking about, the necessity breeds creation, the use it, lose it kind of thing, where it's like, all right, well, this is what's going on here now. Here's something that I need to deal with. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be heartache. There's going to be longing for things, whether it's your toilet paper or anything else. But if it's the way that we deal with it, right? It's what we do with that situation. And whether you believe that there's a man in the cloud judging you every single movement, or whether it's just who you are as an individual, your spirituality, like, this is who I am and I don't want to change from that. This is all testing that fortitude that you have of the self, right? So I think we just have to look at it and go, okay, this is life. This is essentially what we have been signed up for, whether we chose to or not. It's another story. This is what we need to go through. So if we deal with it reasonably, right, things are going to be okay. We'll get through it. But yeah, I definitely thought it was an interesting thing to sort of like pop up for me after we had a discussion last week in regards to the afterlife and what happens, and having every want and desire met.
Yeah, I think, like, stepping back from this thing about as far as we can, like, getting to, like, the point of, like, control, right? Like, I think if we can step back enough to really, like, assess the situation in terms of control, right? Like, there are so many things about this situation that I think we would, like, obviously want to be different, like, in our personal lives at a global level, as a, like, family, local level. But, the thing is, in most things in life, we don't control everything, right? Like, in the grand scheme of things, there's very little that we actually have control over. I would say, like, there's even some argument to be made that, like, the only thing you truly have control over is, like, how you tend to, like, I guess you could say, like, react to situations, and even that's arguable, because, like, somebody walks up and shoots you. I mean, sure, you don't, like, have to react by, like, punching them or something, but I think, like, on some level, we don't have anywhere near as much control as our mind likes to make us think we do, right? And, like, I've thrown out my worry flowchart plenty of times. Do you have a problem? Yes, no. If no, then don't worry about it. If yes, can you do anything about it? Yes or no? If yes, then don't worry about it, because you can do something about it. If no, then don't worry about it, because you can't do anything about it. I think if we apply this, like, in mass to, like, this whole situation, I mean, obviously there are going to be things that come up, but, like, are they really all that different from, like, normal life, right? Like, what about the guy that's, like, homeless or pretending to be homeless, if we really want to get into it, that, like, walks up to you on the street and, like, asking you for a few bucks? I mean, you either give it to him or you don't, right? I mean, this is, like, a much more exaggerated, kind of like the same situation. There's going to be people in this situation that obviously are going to probably need help. Do we choose to help them? Do we not? Like these are the kind of things that I think we can, have some sort of control over. We can decide to do what we think is right or what we want to do, or we can react out of fear. We can hide ourselves away and, everybody fend for themselves. But, in the grand scheme of things, man, like, there's just so much shit that we don't have control over, right? Like, let's say we survive this completely unscathed. Maybe we even come out ahead, right? Like, we all went into crypto. We come out of here like, the new millionaires or whatever, right? Well, we're still stuck with a situation where the vast majority of the world's probably going to be in poverty, right? There's nothing stopping us from, getting hit by a fucking meteor walking out of our house, or, like a random drunk driver, or, like health problems. I mean, like in the grand scheme of things, dude, we don't control when we die. We don't really control our health as much as we like to think we do. Like, sure, there are things we can do to be healthier, but in the grand scheme of things, man, like we don't control this whole experience, right? So I think it's definitely important to be mindful of that and not get so caught up on these things we don't have control over, because all it really does is just increase our suffering. At least that's how I feel about it. And Cope DC'd. Okay, well, I unmuted you, Cope.
That's butter. Yeah, it's a little bit choppy, so disconnected and got back in, and seems okay. Still a little bit choppy. We'll see how it goes. So anyway, what I was going to get at here is, yeah, look, control is kind of like an illusion at sometimes, right? But we do have some control. So I guess it comes down to the degree of control that we have, because again, we go into this binary mindset where some of us think that we have complete control, others think that we have no control whatsoever. And of course, being the fence sitter that I am, I believe that the truth lies somewhere in the middle, because like you choose to do particular things, right? And then maybe programming beforehand, maybe it's religion that guided your mental manipulation. Maybe it was societal norms and that kind of thing. But you still have like some degree of control there. I mean, it's not completely given away, and how much we choose to engage that degree of control is up to us. Sometimes it's mindless. For those of us that are aware of the fact we're going to autopilot mode, like I know that I do it sometimes where I'm just like spacing out and I just like snap back and I'm like, dude, I was just like completely in like autopilot mode kind of thing. Being aware of the difference between being in one mode and being in the other is the start of having that control and being able to choose when to engage, your mental state. Go, okay, well, I'm not going to be another sheep in the crowd. I'm going to think for myself and do my own things. But it can be difficult to do that. Like it's something that you need to work on. So like a muscle, you need to train, keep exercising. So then you have greater control of when you're in control. I know that sounds a bit weird, but anyway. But yeah, I completely agree with you when it comes to the whole control thing. A lot of the time we overestimate the amount of control that we do have in particular situations. So, what do we do about it, Clay? That's this thing. What do we do about it?
Fuck. I don't know. Talk Cope.
Yo.
Okay. I was trying to do something else, and then I can't remember. I couldn't figure out if I hit my mic or my headphone mute. I didn't want to go full aggroed in your ears with the, like the, but, yeah, I mean, again, in the grand scheme of things, like, we could debate that all day. What do you have control over, right? But, I don't know, man. I say surrendering that control and just trying to do what you feel is right is probably the only real path forward here. But, again, like, even not looking at this situation at all, but, like, looking at life in general, like, all the things we ever go through, I mean, doesn't that same logic kind of, like, hold through, right? Like, all you can really do is what you feel is right and what you believe is, like, the best course of action going through life. And I realize we all have different perspectives. We all have different ways of like looking at these things. But my personal opinion, what do you do? Surrender to the universe. Like I've said this before, and it's really weird coming from a place like that I was before to where I am now. But I really do like firmly believe that you have to have faith in something, right? And when I say this, like, I don't want to get it confused with religion, because I've again, made my stance on religion pretty clear before too. But I definitely think that like faith is something that like every human being needs to have, right? Now you can have faith in yourself, you can have faith in love, you can have faith in, like pretty much anything if you really want to get down to it. But if you don't like have some kind of faith in something, then you're gonna always be like kind of operating from that place of fear, right? I think you can have like misplaced faith, right? Like there's people out there that like all their faith is in money and power, and yeah, like can I say it's right or wrong? No, from my perspective, it's wrong. But yeah, I mean we're all unique. We all get our own perspective, but I don't know. Again, I feel like if you don't have like some kind of like faith in something, that like you're gonna fall for anything, right? And the situation's gonna probably break a lot of people. Looking at how it's playing out so far, let's assume the mainstream media is right. Like the death tolls are rising, etc. It's gonna impact a lot of people. Like if the death rate is like something like 2% or higher, that I mean, like pretty much none of us is going to get away from this without knowing somebody that's impacted by this, right? Like even if it's our own family or our friends, you gotta realize like 2% means 1 out of every 50 people, 4%, 1 out of every 25. I mean, like who here doesn't like on some level know 50 people? Like even if it's just like an acquaintance level. Uh, it's gonna be some trying times, man. But you know, what do you do? I think the only thing you can do just surrender to the universe. Try to be the best possible version of yourself you can, and try to have faith in something, and maybe just share some love.
Yeah, for sure. There's something I want to check out there as well when it comes to statistics and things like that. They're complex, right? So let me just give you an example, because you're talking about like 2% and 5% and all these percentages and that kind of thing. Just stats, right? That's surveys and having a look at what's been going on. Now, very similar in the sciences, you have these kinds of numbers come up, and they're often misinterpreted. Right? And one of the best examples that I have of this, and something I think it was in a TV show, it might have been like Shameless or something like that, where essentially there's a statistic that 50% of people that are in a long-term relationship cheat. Right. So what this person was saying, and again, what was happening in the show as well, the statement made was that, well, if you're in a relationship, are you cheating, yes or no? And if you're not cheating, then your partner is definitely cheating. That's not how stats work. Right. But it's a very easy mindset to fall into and think, well, that's how it works, right? Because 50%, I'm not the one I'm not cheating, therefore they're cheating. That's not how stats work, right? There's also a bunch of other sort of like data that you need to take into consideration, because there are going to be pairings of people who both are cheaters, one where one is cheating, the other one is not, and ones where neither are cheating, right? And this is something that we need to take into consideration, but it often flies straight over our heads because we hear that 50%, that means no. That's not how it works, right? So, take this into consideration as well when you're looking at the stats for whether it's coronavirus or anything else moving forward in the future. It's just the data from the sample that they've taken, which is, they can't test everybody who has coronavirus because we don't know all the people that have coronavirus. I mean, some people are, sitting at home thinking they don't have it when they do have it, right? So these stats are going to shift and change and that kind of thing. All it is a reflection of the data as we have it right now. And all you can do is look at it and go, okay, well, does this mean that I'm going to go out into the world and do shit normally, or am I going to start doing things a little bit differently? That's about it. We can't add anything else to it. So going back to the example that I was giving with the whole cheating and that kind of thing, just because the stats say that 50% of people in committed relationships cheat doesn't mean, and of course you're the one who's not cheating, it doesn't mean that you can turn around to your partner and blaze them, absolutely tear shreds of them because the stats said, right, that they're cheating, because it doesn't work like that. So keep that in mind moving forward. Don't believe everything that you hear. Use your brain, right? Be smart about it, and keep it cool.
I think something else to kind of like remind people of in this situation, and I don't know, I'll go ahead and tell you guys this, since you're all here and you're the people that I talk to once a week. But earlier this week, I actually had to skip work because I was possibly having symptoms, and I don't know. One, I didn't want to risk getting other people sick, and two, like I felt like death fucking rolled over. But I think something to be very mindful of is that like not everybody that gets this thing is going to fucking die. Okay, a lot of people that get this thing, it's just like going to be, like a bad flu, right? Or at a technical level, this thing is a viral pneumonia, so like it's gonna get into your lungs, etc. Obviously, depending on your health and things like that, you could be much more susceptible to it. But I think like it's important to be mindful of what it actually is, right? Because that's one of the things I feel like with the media hysteria kind of situation going on. Man, like they're pumping this thing up like the fucking Black Plague. It's like I remember when Ebola was like there was like that Ebola scare a few years back. I mean, dude, like the Ebola scare wasn't worse than this. You know what I'm saying? Like this is so much worse than the Ebola scare, and it kind of like blows my mind because like if you know what Ebola is and like what it does to you, Ebola actually like makes your body fucking hemorrhage. Like you will be like puking black blood. Like your fucking eyes will be leaking blood. Like basically your body just starts to like fucking melt into like a pool of black blood for like to like kind of like sum this up. Now, can you imagine like all of this hysteria is like to the point that it is compared to something that was doing that has a higher contagion rate? Again, like I'm not trying to downplay this thing to say like it's nothing to worry about. You shouldn't, like be washing your hands and like all this kind of stuff. But I mean, like to me, this is common sense stuff. You should be washing your hands and keeping yourself clean if you don't want to catch any kind of bugs that are like going around, right? But again, like back to like the whole smokescreen theory, I definitely feel like the media is like running away with this for reasons beyond just like we need to stay safe, right? I definitely think there's some kind of agenda going on, and I think we're gonna see what that is. But just like watching the stuff that tries to like kind of sneakily be passed while everyone's distracted, I've already seen like again the cryptography law. I've seen bailouts for people that are basically gambling with stocks, which to me is like even worse than the banking bailouts because like you're literally paying off people's like degenerate gambling habit. And then we also see this new law to detain people trying to get like sneakily passed through. But like all the stuff you hear about the news is like how bad the death toll is, how much this virus is spreading, and maybe like a little bit about where's my Trump check. So I think, like while these things are big, like while there's something to be mindful of and be kind of like aware of and trying to do what you can to help contain, etc. I think there's much more going on that we do need to be aware of. And I would say like if you take nothing else away from this, I would highly advise you to kind of like at least get a bigger picture than just worrying about the virus right now.
Yep, for shiz. So about we change gears. We talked about Corona for the past bloody hour, mate.
Yeah, I would like to point out that I'm really loving this the new fucking pink guy meme that's like kind of blowing up right now. If you're not a Filthy Frank fan, yeah, just like a regular like little aside here. Filthy Frank has apparently turned into Joji, who was like some kind of like mainstream like kind of like pop star now, which I don't even know how to express the level of what the fuck that does in my mind, but it's like when people talk about like they loved a band and then they sold out and went mainstream, like if you're not familiar with Filthy Frank, all I would say is like look up some old YouTube videos of Filthy Frank and then look up Joji, Joji, and just see like the fucking 180 this motherfucker pulled. It's pretty mind blowing. But yeah, what you got on your mind, Cove? What are we gonna switch to?
Well, I got a few things, as I said. Always got the list happening on my phone. But something that came to mind the other night while I was baked as fuck doing my thing was that the objective truth is still subjective. I don't know. That just came into my mind, and I thought, like, yeah, we should probably talk about that. And the concept there was like, no matter what the objective truth is, right? Because that's external. When we take it internal through, our limited senses as a human being, the human condition, Ron, um, it becomes a subjective truth. Right? And I just thought that was pretty interesting.
Okay. Oh man, I've gotta go find this real quick. But like I wrote this post a while back, trying to like express, kind of like via example, how to get people to comprehend that truth is subjective. Because whenever I first started talking about this idea, like I got like a lot of pushback. People are kind of like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Truth is subjective. It's either true or it's not true." And
Yeah,
I'm like,
as you do.
well, like then perspective comes into play, right? And what is true for one person is not necessarily true for another. Kind of like how right and wrong can be subjective, right? Like for somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, eating people is, completely normal. Like we're all the fucking degenerates who go around not eating people. Like what the fuck's wrong with us, right? But I did make a post like a long time ago. I'm thinking like probably like 2 to 3 years ago. But yeah, so what are you thinking, Cope, about the subjectivity of truth?
Well, I was just thinking, like when it comes down to how we interact with one another, this concept of air quotes truth, and again, as we've mentioned in the past, the emotional math that goes into these kinds of things is often like lost in the whole like emotional ocean that we exist in, right? Because even just with the concept of control that we were talking about a minute ago, right? If we've all seen this happen, right? Dude comes in late for work, right? Saying it's not my fault. Alarm clock didn't go off. The power went out in my house. Whatever it is, right? But the fact is like it will, to your boss, it is your fault. Right? It doesn't matter, right? Like if your power went out, right, you should have had backups. You should have had an analog system like the old school clocks that ding a ling a ling mechanically, not electrically. There's a whole bunch of different means that we can look at. But in this situation, you have a person who believes something is not their fault because it's not my fault that I had a blackout and these kinds of things and I was late for work. Whereas your boss has the perspective that, well, it doesn't matter what your excuse is, it is your fault because if in your personal life you conducted yourself better, you would be in a better routine to wake up and sleep at particular times, and you'd wake up without an alarm clock, or like however you want to put it, right? But this truth is subjective, and again, this is personal stuff, right? At the same time, I've also interacted with other people who say, for instance, they're mourning the loss of someone, and to be honest, I see this come up a lot with people that I interact with at this particular level, where they tend to believe that someone's passing is their fault, right? Regardless of whether it is or not. I mean, like directly, right? They think, well, if I had of interacted with this person, maybe I should have called them more, maybe I should have like done this more, maybe on that day. I wanted to do this particular thing with them, but then I chose not to. Therefore, it's my fault and that kind of thing. So, obviously, that's not their fault, right? But they have this perspective that it is their fault, right? And that's just like emotional stuff, which we can understand there'd be some variation in what we take in as being legitimately someone's fault or not. But it's all perspective based, right? This is kind of like what I'm getting at here. It's all perspective based. And that means that whatever information or data is in front of us, we take it in through the senses, we process it in some way, shape, or form, and then it becomes our air quotes truth. And even though we can be two individuals looking at the same thing, that truth that we take away from this particular event or whatever it is can be different. So the objective truth will never be ours in a sense, if that makes sense, right? Because it exists outside of our understanding, because we can only take it in through our senses, and once we do take it in through our senses, it becomes a subjective, not objective truth. Does that make sense? What do you reckon?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little distracted by this other thing going on. But yeah, the problem with truth being subjective is like what you're saying there with, people are gonna have a different perspective on it, right? Like, just because I think something is true does not make it true from your perspective. And like I dropped that post that I had made before because I tried to like work through I guess you could say, kind of like a hypothetical situation, right? To kind of like explain how this can happen, especially for people that don't buy into the truth is subjective mentality. But I think it kind of has to be, right? Because there's always that whole opposite side of the coin situation that comes up, right? Like, especially with known and unknown factors, right? Like, then that should tell us that there is a known and unknown truth, right? Like, just because we think something is true, it can very much be like a limited part of the truth, right? Like, it can very much be true from our perspective, but whenever you look at the bigger picture, from like a greater than, quote unquote perspective, you get everyone's, kind of like collective consensus of what is truth. And I think like what we find a lot of times is whenever you take multiple people's perspectives into account, we find that like even if we just like kind of like look at it from the pie chart example, right? No one's person like no one person's perspective of truth is ever going to fill up the whole pie chart, right? But from our limited perspective, it's very easy to imagine that like we have the whole picture. Like our truth is definite, it's unwavering. And while there may be lots of other people out there that all have like these little like slices of the pie here, like it's very easy to kind of like have that mindset. Well, they either may agree with us or disagree with us, but they don't have the whole picture. It's definitely like to me an egotistical thing, right? Like I guess we kind of get into like the whole center of the universe mentality, but yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I had to really like break down and like struggle with for a while, right? Because the situation that I was kind of like inspired to start doing all of this, soul searching from, is like I was kind of like coming out of like a pretty like fucked up relationship type situation, and all of my truths were very much being conflicted with the other person's. Now, if you can't see the other person as like bad or like evil or anything like that, then how do you reconcile them having like a very different perspective of reality than you do, right? Well, if your reality is the only reality, and anybody that disagrees with your reality is obviously either lying or wrong or whatever, then it's kind of hard to reconcile that, right? Because like, how can somebody be a good person? Like, how can you love this person, etc.? How can you not see them as like in some kind of way like bad or manipulative, etc.? If you like don't see them like that, how can you think that their quote unquote truth is any less important than your truth? So like that's kind of like my starting point of like where I started really trying to like break down this idea of truth and figure out like how can it be that two people can have such like a starkly different truth. And it really like helped me kind of like break into the idea of perspective, because again like I've mentioned this before, but perspective is one of those words that I had heard a lot but really didn't have like a real working concept of. And I feel like whenever you can really like start to like break that down and like grasp some of these like fundamental concepts, it really like opens up the doors to a lot of like self growth. It really like helps you to kind of like improve your communication skills, And I think it can definitely like help you have much more meaningful connections with other people, right? Because so much about like understanding perspective kind of like translates into having respect for the other person, you know? Like it's very easy to think that like we are like the one right way, that things are, etc. But I think there's a much bigger picture, and being mindful of the fact that we never have, like that whole pie of truth, and realizing that on some level you're always going to like bump into contrast and differing perspectives with other people. Just being mindful of that and not trying to force your autonomy on other people is a really good tool to actually having meaningful communication.
I think one of the good examples that I've had in my understanding of like these variation in perspectives, and it was really interesting that you said the whole center of the universe, like the Earth is the center of the universe, because I've got that literally written down here. Because I was going to refer to the fact of the sciences, and yeah, science has technically got it wrong a lot more times than it's gotten it right, and it's bound to do more so in the future as we learn and grow, because science technically is never wrong because it never actually makes a statement, right? It doesn't say this is the truth. It says this is what we've found, and that's it, right? It doesn't expand beyond that. But anyway, going back to this example that sort of like clarified it for me a little bit, and it was artwork. It was art based. Um, that essentially it was pretty sure it was like a high school teacher, something along those lines, where we were looking at a fruit bowl essentially, and we were wrapped around it as a classroom, and we were drawing it, and we all had different drawings clearly because we had different perspectives, but it was the same thing. Right? We were looking at the same thing, and we all had our different artworks, and it could be easy to say that the person sitting across from me is wrong. Right, like I know what I saw and I drew it, and this is what it looks like to the best of my ability. And I'm looking at your artwork, which shows something completely different from me, and it's to the best of your ability to express, through your physical motion and your drawing or painting capabilities. You're painting this thing that you see, and I'm painting the same thing, but it's just from a different angle, right? And for me to say that you're wrong and you to say that I'm wrong is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense, because in that realm we can very easily understand that the person was sitting on the other side. So the apple is on the other side of the banana, right? Because I'm on completely opposite side from you, right? So I understand that, okay, well, these things are flipped for you, right? So I don't contest it. But when it comes to these kinds of perspectives, we get so like emotionally caught up in these things, and it's the truth and I know it and that kind of thing, that we lose sight of the fact that somebody who's sitting on the other side, to the left, to the right, wherever else that they're sitting, may be seeing it differently from us. And that's where it kind of like that example there like solidified the whole fact for me, that we can be looking at the same thing, we can have different thoughts, perspectives, different opinions, and that's okay. Right? There's nothing wrong with that if that's what they're thinking, that's how they're seeing it. Okay, well, if it's not something that you like, you just leave it the fuck alone. Uh, and that's about it. But like, I think we can learn from that example there, that if we take that and we apply it to different things, even to the level of sciences, where that's the same thing that they're doing. They're looking at something and they're saying, well, this is the data that I have right here, right now, from this perspective, from this angle. I'm looking at the fruit bowl. This is the data that I've collected. This is a representation of that, whether it's graphs, whether it's a drawing, whether it's anything else. This is what we've got right here and now. Now, in the future, I may move to the other side of this thing. I may move to the right, to the left, and I may see something different. And I'm going to make notes on that. I'm going to put that out there. I'm going to let you know that this is what I've seen. This is what I've found through the data. But right now, this is what we've got. And having that understanding, it gives you the capability of being fluid in your methods of thinking. So you're not stuck on this one perspective that you sit in right now.
Yeah, I think like looking at like the painting, example that you were just giving there. I think that's one of the things that I think it's always important to remember, is that whenever we get into like these subjective areas, this is also probably like the greatest area for truth, right? Like I would say, like beauty, right? Like let's just take the topic of beauty here. Beauty is so subjective that like in general everybody kind of like has a different perspective on it. It's the same way with something like pain, right? Like if you took a hammer and hit everybody in the toe, we're gonna all have a different pain, going on. We're gonna all probably have like somewhat of a different unique reaction to it. So we look at something like beauty, right? Well, like maybe I find this girl beautiful, right? And Cope, you're like, she's all right or whatever. Or maybe you're just not into that type, whatever. But also, like it's not even just like subjective on that level. There are also things that kind of like come into play too. Whenever we look at something like your emotional attachment to the other person, right? Like, have you ever heard that? I guess it's technically like a saying, right? But like, whoever you're in love with is always going to be like the most beautiful woman in the world, right? I think that's pretty fucking valid, especially like in my experience, right? Like, I'm definitely an appreciator of the female farm. I think a lot of you would know, and sorry my accent, female form, but I definitely think like just going from like a looking physical like no attachment type situation to being like involved with the other person, having like an emotional connection, etc. I think this also kind of like shades your perspective of beauty, right? Like anybody that you're like seriously like full on in love with is going to be the most beautiful person in the world to you. Uh, if they're not, then I would say like arguably you're probably not like actually in love with the person. At least from my experience, I don't know. Maybe it's different for other people, but like again, like this definitely translates. The female farm. We got them all lined up out there. Got herds of twerkers. We're gonna go milk the twerkers later, Julia. But I think like especially like translating this over to something like pain, right? I think it's a really good example of why doctors have such like a complex and like conflicting, complicated relationship with treating pain. Like obviously the person experiencing the pain should be the one dictating how bad the pain is, right? The doctor might be able to look at an MRI and be like, you only got like one slip disc, like it's probably not that bad. I've seen people with like, like their whole lumbar completely herniated and we've got to like fuse them all together. So, like maybe your pain's only worth a Loratabid to them, where like the other person might be like, we'll go ahead and give them some Oxycontin, right? But, the person with like the complete, lumbar, herniation, whatever, if that's a word. But basically, like they maybe have like a lot higher pain tolerance, right? Or maybe they're more used to it, and maybe they also don't really care for like being, strung out on opiates for the rest of their life, right? Uh, and then again, like there's people that have different reactions to drugs too. So like there's so many different layers to this thing, right? To try to think there's like a one size fits all, like chart that we can make, it's not very realistic. I think we have to understand that people's perspective, like their truth, definitely plays into this, and it kind of like is what it is in that situation, right? Like, who am I to tell you that you're not in pain? Because I've seen people worse that don't need pain medication. Like, is that fair? I would say that's pretty fucking negligent, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to pain and that kind of thing, yeah, it's a rough thing to try and wrangle with. When it comes to you know dealing with medical air quotes professionals, um, and from experience and from you know anecdotal stories that I've heard from other people, etc., etc. Um, it turns into a complex soup of perspective based opinions. And you'll have one doctor that will turn around and say, "Oh, that's it. That's the most terrible thing on the planet, and you're never going to walk again." And then you've got another one who's like, "Ah, well, that's just you just fell over. Just get up and walk it off," kind of thing. And this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. We can have two people looking at the exact same thing and have two completely different outcomes on perspective, prognosis, however you want to put it, depending on what they're looking at. But something that came to mind for me was, I like to get into the whole deep and meaningfuls, the DMs with people. And something that I see quite often is the whole breakup stories, right? Because when someone is with someone, as you were saying, like that they see the beauty and they're like, oh my God, there's infatuation happening and they're in love and all those kinds of things. And it's kind of like it takes over. It's a chemical that invades your brain, right? And that's all well and good while you're in love. But then when things take a turn for the worst and you end up in that good old breakup bucket that we like to get in, we see the opposite perspective of that. And, there's one story that stands out in particular for me was this mate of mine who was like, head over heels and everything was, sunshine, rainbows and butterflies and all that kind of thing. And of course, they broke up and they had some kids together and that kind of thing. And, this guy was around here and we're having a few drinks and that kind of thing. And it went from being like, oh, she's so beautiful and her eyes are like this, I can see the sunset in her eyes and such beautiful stardust in there and all that kind of thing. To this dude being like, man, I didn't even know what I saw in her, man. Like, your face is like this and her nose is like that. And, she's got an all right ass. But apart from that, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm just like, dude, man, this is such a high contrast from where you were at before. Clearly the perspective had changed, right? This is within the same individual, within the one human being. So going through a particular experience with someone changed the perspective from being, this pedestaled individual to being someone that, they wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire kind of thing. And I found that like really interesting. Like this is a person who has gone through something and this perspective has changed. By the same token, some other examples that I've got as well come from, if you've grown up with someone, right, who's, in the category of someone you can have a relationship with, right? But you've grown up with them and you see him as a brother or a sister or that kind of thing, and someone's like, oh, you should get together with this person. And you're just like, oh my God, it's disgusting. It's like my brother, man, like terrible, right? But at the same time, you've got the same formula happens, and these people fall in love and they have a family and everything works out, rainbows and butterflies kind of thing. And again, it comes down to perspective. Like it's how you perceive these things, and this is something we need to understand and take into consideration when it comes down to how we are experiencing our lives, because there's not a lot we can do about the perspective, but understand it. That's the only thing that we can do.
Yep. I mean, it are what it are, Cope. It bees what it do bees.
But being aware is the first step towards gaining on it, I guess. Because like once we understand it, we can start applying interventions. But anyway, next subject.
If there was only like some magical a magical like awareness pill that we could take, right? And it's like
getting work.
Yeah. You take like the woke pill, and then all of a sudden you have perspective, and it all makes sense. I don't know. Maybe we could call it like DMT or something, right?
Well, that's the thing, it does exist. It is out there, and as Dunn is saying here, people will and do abuse it, but there are countermeasures for those that are interested. Because I've talked to a few people that have abused the material, and they actually get locked out. Which is it's really like, this is why this material is so interesting to me as a person. Like for me, I find this really interesting. Because I've talked to a few people who have just been like, yeah, all day, every day, twice on Sunday, I'm just like smashing it kind of thing. And they end up getting locked out. It's like there is another party involved, is probably the best way to put it, who just goes, well, yeah, okay, like I can see what you're doing and I'm not going to let you, right? You can't keep doing this kind of thing. So, it's interesting. Right? I'm not going to say that it's anything. It's God or it's a spiritual being or it's Mother Ayahuasca or like whatever. Um, but there are some interesting interactions that people have when they try and abuse this particular material. So it does exist.
Yeah, and again, I definitely, as much of a proponent as I am here, I don't think psychedelics are like a one size fits all solution, and I don't think they just like, I guess we could say like, I don't think they instantly fix the problems, but I definitely think that through maybe I think we like kind of like default to like this whole like shamanism word a little bit too much, but like basically through like actual interaction with other people that are like kind of like on that level and utilizing the right tools, I totally do believe that like anybody can get there if they want to get there. Like if they're actually like receptive to it, if they're actually trying. This is also one of the reasons why like I don't like the words of like labeling people as like a quote unquote narcissist, right? I can tell you, looking back at my life, like let's say 4 years ago, if I looked at who I was 4 years ago right now, I would probably like full on say sociopath. I mean, I'm just being honest. Like, the way I interacted with other people, the way I was, like, completely the fucking center of the universe in my own mind, I had, like, extreme narcissism. I don't know. Like, so many of these words, like, these labels, like narcissist, sociopath, like, all these things, like, really fit me, right? Like, part of how I got to where I am right now is by studying these things and, like, looking at the behaviors and then really like breaking down my own beliefs and my own behaviors, figure out where they came from, why am I like this, etc., etc. I feel like so much of our problems could be solved by looking within as opposed to like looking outside of ourselves for the answers, right? Now, I think there are things outside of us that can help. I think interaction with other people that are I don't really like view things as like a better than or worse than. A lot of times when it comes to people, like I mean, there are some things I starkly disagree with that I can't really justify, like like murdering rapists, child molesters, but. I think like on the whole, like just looking at like the average human being, I really struggle to see myself as better than or less than anyone else right now. Now, that being said, I think interacting with people that have like gone through these struggles, like kind of gotten some level of self-awareness and utilizing these tools external to yourself, I think these things can help people get there. But I definitely think that these things are achievable, kind of like on your own if you really wanted to just like put the time into it, really like do the soul searching and figure the shit out. That being said, it's really hard when you have no concept of what it is you're looking for, right? I mean, like, how do you explain self awareness to somebody that has no idea of it, right? Like, you can tell them the word, but what does the word mean, right? Like, oh, look, there's that phrase, self awareness. I'm going to go get some of that. Let me open up the dictionary and read about it. But like you have to experience it, right? Like you have to actually go through it. You have to break down your concept of self and really kind of like dissect it and really, put the pieces back together. It's like your whole self identity is really this giant fucking jigsaw puzzle. But there's not just one way to assemble it. Like the pieces match up in different places, and sometimes shit gets jumbled up, and you get really like negative patterns that we can get stuck into. But whenever we can dissect these things and break them down and put the pieces back together in a much more harmonious way, I feel like anybody has this power, right? Like, I don't think this is like some superhuman trait, but I also don't think everybody knows what they're looking for or even why they should want to get to this kind of a place, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think when it comes down to, we're talking about like DMT and LSD and a whole bunch of psychedelics and that kind of thing. We have to have an understanding that's it is kind of like an air quotes shortcut to nirvana, right? And what we also need to understand is there are people that dedicate their lives to achieving this, right? They sit under trees in the wilderness. They go into, isolation. They deprive themselves of food, of sleep, and a whole bunch of different things to try and have this moment of awakening through meditation, through a whole bunch of different things. And some of them never achieve it, right? Because that's the thing. Like, trying to do something is different from succeeding at doing something. So some of these people will try and try and try and will never achieve that. So with these materials, it's seen as like a shortcut. But the people that are trying to do this of their own sort of like, called with their own bodies and that kind of thing without, adding any other kind of chemicals into the situation, they are aware of what they're trying to do. They're trying to achieve a particular thing, a particular goal. They're working towards it. Job done. Whereas like these materials, it's kind of like a pill you can take. It's not a pill, but it can be, but a pill you can take to get you there, kind of thing. So it's seen as like a shortcut. Unfortunately, the fact that it becomes so easy to achieve, air quotes achieve, is that some people will interact with this thing not knowing what it is, what it's for, what they're searching for, or anything at all. They're just kind of like, I'll just try this thing. I will take an air quotes party drug, and they have bad experiences. They're not prepared, because that's the thing. Like, for those that are using the air quotes natural methods of achieving this, they've kind of like found the path for whatever reason, Izzy, the path. And they're like, okay, well, I'm trying to find myself. I'm looking for a spiritual journey. I want to connect with the universe and that kind of thing. So that's why they head down this path, Izzy. And they start meditating, they fast, they do these kinds of things. Whereas, like, some kid that's, out there doing a rave or something like that, whatever the young kids are doing these days. And they take one of these things, they're not really prepared. They're just kind of like just cruising along and they just stumble across it. So there's a stark difference between the two. And this is often why we find some bad experiences. That the bad trips tend to come from people who are not really aware. They don't really understand what it is that they're interacting with. They're just kind of like, oh, well, man, this is cool, man. I'm going to try something else, man. And check another drug and just see what happens, man. And then they just interact with this, and it's like, whoa, holy shit. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. But those that are prepared for the experience, they tend to take more away from it than those that are not prepared. So it's something that we need to understand when it comes to interacting with these materials is the intent, right? And for some of these chemicals and materials and that kind of thing, like, you don't have to have any intent. You just take a little bit of something, you feel a little bit of something, job done. Pain medication, whatever. It achieves a particular outcome, job done, because you're trying to, you have pain, you're trying to minimize that. You take the pill, it happens, job done. Whereas with these things, if you're not prepared, you end up, flying into Never Land, being told, all the various happenings in the universe, and it's an overload. You don't know what the hell is going on. So it can be a bit of a jolting experience for those that are not prepared.
Yeah, and to kind of like tie in with that jolting experience, and I would say probably one of the most intense and possibly scary situations that I could really think of is spontaneous self-awareness. Especially like I imagine somebody that's not looking for this, right? Like, I wasn't looking for it. I didn't know what the fuck I was getting into. And man, whenever like that fucking aha moment, that like satori, whatever we want to call it, whenever it hits, man, it hits you like a fucking Mack truck going full speed. Like all of a sudden you're just like, oh fuck, and like you realize like basically everything I've always thought or known is wrong. I don't know if like wrong is the right word, but maybe it's like so limited, perhaps. Like realizing that your little tiny worldview and like your little segment of existence isn't all that there is. And really kind of like wrapping your mind around this and realizing like how much bigger everything is than just your own little tiny world. It's very fucking humbling would be like one way that I could describe it, but it's fucking intense, right? Like honestly, dude, I'll tell you straight up, like I thought I was fucking like off my goddamn rocker, like put me in a fucking padded room with a straight jacket, right? Like I couldn't wrap my mind around all the shit that was going through my head whenever this experience started. It took me like months to really kind of like I guess we could say like break it down to like where I could start kind of like processing it, dissecting it, and kind of like communicating to other people, like effectively. And like I don't know if you guys ever want a fucking trip, just go back and read like my very first couple of months on Steam. Like basically like I had this experience and I the only thing I could really think to do is get it out of my fucking head, right? I know that might sound crazy, but like it was all there was in my head, right? It was like nonstop, 100 miles an hour, go all times. And it's like every fucking thing that had happened through my past, I'm like going through it with like this different perspective, and I'm like realizing how all of these things that like I had seen from like this one limited perspective, and how I always was like the center of the universe, and really trying to like break it down and understand that everybody else is just as valid as like I am, and really trying to get into like a place of balance. It's intense, right? Like I wouldn't describe this as like a pleasant feeling, but it definitely feels right, if that makes sense. Like it, it's intense. I don't know how else to really put it, right? This is when we get into Plato's allegory of the cave here, right? Like
Yeah.
well, once I rose above the noise and confusion just to get a glimpse beyond the illusion. There's some lyrics for you, Zippy. But yeah, like whenever this moment happens and everything kind of like starts falling into place, it's just like a fucking one of those domino things, right? Where it's just like non-stop and the momentum keeps building. But eventually, like you kind of reach that place of equilibrium and you realize like, okay, well, it's all going to be okay. It was very overwhelming, but I managed to make it to the point where I can start kind of like communicating effectively, and I don't believe I'm like batshit crazy anymore. So well, once you get to that point, it's a very positive experience, and I mean, obviously, I wouldn't change it for anything. But like walking into this with like no idea that like you're looking for this thing, and you have like, again, I don't even know how you could be looking for this thing, right? Because if you have no concept of it, yeah, I don't know. I can only see it from my perspective, like my experience. But dude, like it was like getting hit by a fucking Mack truck.
Well, look, I'll tell you something straight up, right? Now, losing your mind is a start of sanity, right? It sounds crazy, I know, but hear me out. Hear me out, right? Because the thing is, what you think is sanity is dictated to you by your surroundings, right? Whether it's your parents, whether it's religion, whether it's society in general, your job, or anything else. Like, there's kind of like these structures that are like thrust upon you throughout your life, and you believe this is normal, this is sanity, right? But it's fucking not. And this is where we find this tug of war, if you will, with the internal and the external. Like, we know what's happening on the outside, and we are doing our best to put on the face that we need to do to face that every day. And make ends meet, to get paid, to keep the kids in school, to keep people happy, whatever it is that we're trying to achieve, right? But the fact is, when we let all of this shit go, because this is all not part of who we are as individuals. This is what we're doing to try and be, air quotes, normal, right? But letting that go is like the first part of gaining your sanity, right? And I think this is why when it comes to psychedelics and that kind of thing, we have this moment at breakthrough. We have these moments, of ego death, right? Because it's who we think we are and who we think we're projecting out there into the world. Which, trust me, nobody sees you the way that you think that they see you. Right? You have no control over that. Since we were talking about control a bit earlier, you only have control of the self, like you, who you are, what you do, what you think. Right? Everything on the other side of that boundary, you have no control over. So as much as you may think you're doing your best to make people think things of you, they're going to think whatever they think. Right? So just leave that alone. Unfortunately, we tend to think that we do have control over that, and this is where this tug of war happens, because we're trying to make people think things, and we're saying particular things, and what do people want to hear, and all those kind of things. When you have this interaction with these psychedelics, it kind of like just hardcore knife cuts through that shit and casts it aside and says, okay, well, like, I understand this is who you think you are and what you're trying to do and all that kind of thing, but that ain't shit, bro. So cast it aside, and this is where we have the ego death. And when we transfer beyond that, we have an interaction with the air quotes universe that's not bound by our own ego, because it can create a lot of bias in how we see things and that kind of stuff. So it's not useful for what we're doing in that realm. So, and this is why I say, like, that losing your mind is the start of sanity, is because you're letting go of all these things that don't really mean anything except to you, right? And that's the first part, is not giving a shit about that and trying to interact with the universe in a different way without the ego. And this is why we have this feeling of like completeness, probably the best way to put it, when we have these experiences, because we're detached from the self. And we can bring some of that data back that we interact with, whether it's reptilians or aliens or anything else, so the crazy shit that you see on the other side of things. It's kind of like you interacting with yourself and having that conversation without the ego, right? You remove the ego and you just have like real conversations with yourself. And this is why when you come back, you can have like moments of clarity where you just go, you know what, I'm going to make a life-changing decision. I'm not going to go back to that job because they don't appreciate me. Because I've seen it, not from my own perspective, but from an outsider's perspective. I've seen the whole. And even though I may not necessarily understand it, I know that I deserve better, or whatever it is. And whether it's relationship, job, or anything else, you come back with that clearer mindset. And this is kind of like how it happens. It's essentially the ego death, which is scary. A lot of people fear the ego death. But like I said, it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, speaking of those words that I feel like you can't really grasp like the full extent and the concept of until it kind of like smacks you in the face like that, right? Dude, like, perspective was one of those words, and ego was definitely another one, right? Like, dude, I can't even tell you, like, how many times I've heard the word ego in my life, and really had zero fucking concept of what an ego was, but was so fucking positive that, like, I knew what it was, right? Like, it's incredible just, like, how heavy our assumptions about things can, kind of, like, cement something into our mind, right? Like, I can't even tell you what I thought an ego was, right? Like, it was just an ego. It's a word. Like, some people have big egos, some people have small egos, but, whatever. And then, like, once, you get hit by that Mack truck and you realize, like, fuck, that motherfucker in my head that's been talking to me for the last 30 years was my ego. Like, oh, shit. Like, it's fucking intense, again, right? Like, and like I said, dude, going into this kind of shit without expecting it can definitely make you feel, like, off your fucking rocker. Like, I really don't know how else to put it, right? Like, so many of these things, like, whenever you start realizing, like, damn, like, I was living in a world of fucking assumptions and expectations, and I was trying to force all that shit onto other people, and You know, like most of the problems that have come up in my life are all due to these things right here, right? Like because I'm so lost in my own ego, I'm completely, like oblivious to other people, and I've been trying to control the universe my whole life, and feeling like I was playing a fucking rigged game because obviously you don't control the universe, so it always feels like the odds are stacked against you. But again, man, like I while I can't say it's a pleasant experience, I mean, I don't think anybody should not have that experience. Like you need that Mack truck to just smack you upside the head one good time, and just be like, fuck, have that aha moment. And, like that's how you get past it. Like you don't get out of the forest without going through the trees. Like it's just not possible. I mean, even if you have somebody like come above you and like lift you up, you still got to go through them, right? I mean, I think there are shortcuts. I think there are tools that can help you get there easier or at least quicker. But you still have to have the experience, right? So, like, even if you use psychedelics, even if you have like guided shamanic experiences, etc., you're still gonna have to go through it. And again, I mean, like, it's crazy, like, because once you get to the side of it, you can like really grasp that it's not for you to dictate to other people how to live their lives, what experiences they have to have, etc. But it's interesting an experience like this and like wanting it for everyone else. You know what I'm saying? like like my most traumatic slash amazing experience. Like, well, it's so hard to like wish this on other people, right? Because like how hard it is. You know the struggle. Like, how intense it is. You know how it feels like it completely broke you down to fucking nothing. But you also know what it's like to come out the other side. And, like, how can you not want that for other people, right?
Yeah, exactly. And something that you were mentioning there in regards to, like the situations, how they play out, things need to get worse before they get better. And I think that's it's kind of like a truth that I see, like in the world. It's like even if like things are getting better for you, like in however you want to perceive it, whether it's in a relationship, in a job, or like whatever it is, like it'll get better to a certain point, right? And then things will get worse, right? And again, going back to the contrast we were speaking about a bit earlier, where necessity breeds creation, and once things start going a bit stale, you go like, oh, I'm not down with this anymore. I don't like this anymore. I want to change something, and that's sort of like a key factor there is the change. When we feel that want for change, it may come slowly, it may come quickly, whether it's a Mack truck or anything else. But we see something wrong. We see something that we don't like. We feel that discomfort with who we are, where we are, what we're doing, and we want a change. So I think that it's kind of like a key part of what's going on here is having that contrast of going, okay, like I've been doing this thing for a certain amount of time. It was going good for X amount of time, but like right now, I don't like it anymore. Things are starting to get worse. And an analogy that I tend to use is kind of like the whole surgery thing. Like something happened, you're feeling pain, so things went from good to bad. Right, so you're already in a bad situation. It's not like you're in a good situation; you're in a bad situation. And then they turn around and say, "Well, you need a spine surgery or whatever it is," right? And you're like, "Okay, well, this is the norm, the air quotes norm." So you just like sign off on it, but really think about what's going on here, right? Things were going great. Then suddenly something happened, or maybe over time something happened, and it was detrimental to your existence. Things got bad. Now you're in a bad situation. You want things to get better, but first they have to get worse because these motherfuckers are going to cut you open. You're going to be, you know, open to the elements. There's going to be diseases floating around, maybe even corona, right, flying around, and you could pick this shit up because your spine is open, right? Like it's a clear path, straight path, easy, straight to your spine, right? And they're going to grind some shit, they're going to cut some shit, they're going to do some heavy duty work. But in that moment, you're vulnerable. Right? Things are worse than what they were before. I mean, they've literally cut you open, and then they sew you up, right? And then things start getting better. So things go from being okay to being pretty average, then being a fucking shit. Like, damn, dog, these motherfuckers are cutting you open. But then things get better, and you'll be better off after you go through this painful process. And this is what I mean. Like really think about the cycles that we go through. So realistically, like things have to get worse before they get better.
Cope, how dare you talk about Zippy's spine?
I'm actually talking about my spine, but we're spine twins, me and Zippy. We both got spine issues.
Spinal twins. Yeah. Well, hey, surprisingly,
Cool band name. It's a band name.
Yeah. I don't even know if I've talked about this or not, but I actually, I guess I'll just throw it out there. I actually did have to have a back surgery once upon a time too, and it's definitely a crazy experience.
Spine triplets.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of crazy, right? Because it's from the time before. I guess we could just throw that out there. But yeah, I tried to figure out like what happened, and I think it was from like a fall I took at work. But it's interesting how like whenever you damage something like your spine, right? Like it doesn't always just like show up right away. So I think like what started off as a backache probably got like progressively worse over a couple of months, and it kind of like got to the point where I just had what felt like lightning bolts shooting down my legs at all times. And I couldn't really like stand or walk around. It was harsh, and I, speaking about like the whole lumbar thing that I was earlier is actually kind of like my personal experience. I herniated like my entire lumbar, and I had to go in and have what they call a laparoscopic endosectomy. And yeah, it's a crazy experience. Let's just leave it at that. But coming out of the other side of it, I still have like back pain sometimes and things like that, but I can still walk around now. For the most part, I don't like have those like shooting pains anymore. I definitely, it's not all rainbows and butterflies, but considering where I was before the surgery and where I'm at now, I'm definitely glad that I was able to find a doctor that would do something and that it worked as well as it did. But yeah, so interesting. I don't know if like I said, if I ever talked about that, but I guess all three of us have had spinal issues.
Oh yeah, and definitely the whole case of arthritis. We all have that increased rate of susceptibility to arthritis due to the fact of having surgery. So that's probably the pain that you feel, that I feel, that Zippy feels, since we all had surgery. And that's how the cookie crumbles. But as I was mentioning before, being in a better position than what you were before. And again, going back to the statistics, which I was given, there was kind of like, I think it was like 5%. It was a 5% chance that I was going to not be able to walk again. And there was other stats in there as well. There was like 80% chance that it was going to work. And there was a 5%. And I'm like, okay, so, I didn't look at it as in like, if there's 100 people, 5 people, are definitely not going to walk and that kind of thing. It was just the data and the information. You process it and you just go, okay, well, I want to feel better than what I feel now. So you put yourself in a situation where you get worse and then you start getting better. And this is something that we can take, cut and paste, if you will, whether it's your job situation, whether it's your relationship situation, whether it's family members that you're interacting with, right? If you need to do something right? And it may take something drastic, whether it's you're not talking to someone anymore, or you break up with someone, or you quit your job, whatever it is. It is going to get worse, right? But that discomfort will pass. It will pass easy, and you will find something that's better for you. So whether it's a back surgery that you need to do to get better, whether it's quitting your job and finding a better job, this is what we need to do. It's the change. And this is what we're built for, essentially, as human beings, to continue shifting and changing to find something that's closer to who we are as individuals. And that continues to change day by day, because that's what we do as humans on this good old planet. But switching gears, just once again, if I may. I want to check something a little chat here, because y'all know that I've been, well, Clay knows at least anyway, that I've been doing some work with Blender, right, which is a program, building some stuff. There's a little donut that I built for y'all, and I found some interesting stuff and a little bit scary stuff. Right, I see programming as being quite interesting. It's kind of like we're creating our own universe, our own world, right, when we do these kinds of things. So this is a donut. I made a donut in my world. But something that I found, which is striking and alarming, and at the same time, we were talking about, the whole faking people doing shit, deep fakes, and all that kind of crap. And I found this thing, right, with Blender. You can basically take somebody's face and create an avatar, if you will, whatever. And it's pretty realistic. And this is cheap. This is cheap as in like free. So imagine what the paid stuff is doing.
Yeah. Now, Cope, I'd be interested to see you do like a self-portrait in Blender. See how that turns out. I always find people's self-portraits interesting, but
well, look, I can do this this software here. I don't need to do a self-portrait. I just scan myself into the goddamn thing. The only problem is you can scan other people into things as well. This guy said that he scanned his mates into it without them knowing.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I'm looking at the fucking clock, It's
something for next week, maybe.
Oh man, like it's crazy, right? Like I've shared plenty of my beliefs with you guys, right? But like my views on time and like how irrelevant it is, and like so much shit. But then at the same time, I'm also currently back at the plantation doing the whole wage slavery thing. And it's crazy, man. Like, it's such a different lifestyle being dictated by time. Like, right now, I'm basically kind of like forced into a position where I have to decide if I want to try to get up in 4 hours or if I want to just, like call in or whatever. But, the problem with going the calling in route is that I'm going to eventually end up without the job again, because I can only miss probably like three of these weekend days. So I think I'm about to go crash probably as soon as the show ends, and I'm gonna at least try to get up and see where it goes. But like to kind of like go back to the surgery thing for a second there. What you were talking about with like the chance of death and everything. I remember. I think it's the only time I've ever had to sign one of those like disclosure things, whatever. And it's pretty daunting thinking about like how much pain / discomfort you have to be in to be willing to like sign that paper that says like what's your your possible outcomes of being like not being able to walk. There's like some not 0% chance that you might die on the operating table. Anytime they put you under anesthesia, there's always that chance. But again, right? Like I guess you kind of like have to get to that point where it's like you're suffering so much that like if this is all there is, I'd rather take that risk because this ain't living, And I think that translates over to a lot of things, right? Like, to me, on a less, physically painful aspect, like this whole job thing is kind of like, I feel like, ultimately pushing me to one of those plateaus of how much suffering am I willing to put up with, right? But I don't know, man. Like let's hope this new Hive thing goes well. Maybe I can get back to doing like my online stuff and find some more freedom. Maybe I can just get into a better position to maybe move and find a different type of job or something. But it are what it are, and it bees what it bees, and we're all on the path, right? Path, Azaria. Path.
Yes, we do's what we do's, and we bees what we bees, and that's that. But yeah, look, man, it's.
You think Azaria is even listening?
I don't know. I've said path a few times and she hasn't said anything, so I'm very hurt inside. I'm very hurt. But yeah, look, I think it's a reflection on the fact that as we're talking about before, the contrast is what it's about. When we have that contrast, as uncomfortable as it may be, it is a signal for us to look for new and better things. And if we take that in stride, we can move towards a greater sense of autonomy and a better sense of self.
Word. Yeah, we are about at the ass end of Le Show tonight, and I'm gonna. Oh wow, Zippy gave me a boo bug. I'm gonna have to. I guess post last week and this week. I haven't posted, and I didn't even do the announcement post this week. Mainly with like all this Steam Hive shit going on, but hopefully like sometime during this week I'll have some free time and I can get last week's episode and this week's episode uploaded and post them onto Hive. And yeah, it'll be what it'll be. And I guess let's make some weird noises.
Giddy on the fuck up. Let's do what we do's. Wooka 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 baby girl.